So without further ado, let us welcome Mr. Abhi Veerakumarasivam.
No pressure. No pressure. Hi. This is a piece of lung tissue from a patient who clearly has been smoking for ages based on the color black. But what is striking in this tissue is the tumor tissue that you can actually see here that is abnormal. And this tumor tissue is known as cancer. So what is cancer? Cancer are really normal cells that have become abnormal, and some say acquire the super abilities to basically proliferate and grow and invade into other tissues. Unfortunately, these super abilities result in 8 million deaths and 100 millions of people suffering each year around the world. And basically, the question is, why is it that cancer incidence increases with age? And the answer here is the cell cycle and the genes. The cell cycle is a series of events that allows a single cell to divide and multiply. And when the cell is mutated, damaged, or old, gets destroyed and replaced with new cells. When you are growing up from one cell stage to the beautiful 100 trillion cells that make us all of us, basically, the cell cycle is very rapid. There's increased cell birth and reduced cell death. But as we grow older, the cell cycle rate reduces. And what this means is that there's a reduction in the cell birth, but an increase in cell death, which is why you see your old grandparents literally shrinking as they grow older. And what this means is basically the cell cycle is controlled by a series of events that's controlled by genes that actually result in the way the cell cycle actually occurs. And when these genes are damaged, the cell cycle loses its regulation, and therefore the cell growth, cell birth ratios change. Cancers have 20 to 80 mutations. And when a single cell mutates and continues to mutate to become a cancer, what happens is basically the cell birth increases and cell death reduces, which is why we know tumors are generally larger than the rest of the body or tissues. And what is interesting is basically this process of accumulation of mutation requires a long time, usually between 15 to 40 years. And this is why incidence of cancer really correlates with age. Just like how the risk of accident increases with the length of your journey. The longer you are on the road, there's an increased risk of accidents. And cancer-causing agents such as cigarette smoke that actually directly target the genes that regulate cell cycle will result in an increased risk of cancers. So you can see cigarette smoke and other sort of environmental carcinogens like potholes or slippery roads that increase the risk of cancer in your life. And what's more interesting is basically the rate of replacement in young people, as we alluded earlier. Because the cell cycle is fast, the cells basically that get mutated will be destroyed before they acquire more mutations and become cancer. And that is why if you are young and are smoking, you need to stop smoking before the age of 30 because your risk can be reduced significantly to those that actually haven't smoked. Thank you.
Apart from making me feel more insecure as I'm older rather than younger, thank you so much, Abhi. I've known Abhi for quite some time, and Abhi leads the Young Scientists Network of the Asia Pac. So I told him before the show that I expect more from him as compared to the rest. But one thing I can say is, if you can inject popular culture into your 3 minutes, I think that can help a lot. For example, yes. Because it's still through those role models of idols that people can relate to. So personally, are you for it that screen for cancer genes and then take like very, very serious action on it? Are you for that?
So the question as a geneticist, we will never speak for an individual. What's important, we feel, is education. We need, and in case of Angelina Jolie, which I presume you were alluding to, she's a highly empowered woman. She knew all her choices. She was lucky to have a very supportive spouse, and therefore she made the choices that she made, from radical mastectomy, removing her breasts, and recently removing ovaries, because she understood what risks were. But when I'm teaching students, even medical students, and when I actually talk about risk prediction, it's interesting how heterogeneous the response is. So I think the role as scientists is not to suggest whether you should or not, because you can never put yourself in a position of an individual who's suffering cancer. What you need to do is to give them the objective information so that then they can actually use their cultural, sort of background and make those decisions. In the context of if I basically had the same risk as Angelina Jolie, because I'm informed and empowered, I would have done the exact same.
On the average, are we informed and empowered in
No,
Malaysia?
No, we're not.
And you blame the media for that?
No, we don't. I think it's a combination of science literacy, which I think is everybody's responsibility, including we as geneticists. But the other second information, I think, is like Newton, right? It's the illusion of knowledge that is the greatest impediment to our civilization, not the lack of it. And I think there are lots of commercial conflict of interest and talking about genetic screening without the emphasis on genetic counseling, which is, I think, the greatest threat to basically misinform societies.
Any other questions? Beside Mr. Kamaru Bahari? So it's like, nothing to do with any personal vendetta or something, right?
Well, to be honest, the last time I got interviewed, Kamal Bahrain actually made an extra effort to come up to me and said, "You're so schema." And I don't take that, which is really, straight out of the box. And I'm glad he did that because it made me question how I actually appear and actually communicate. And I'm trying. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Abhi.